I was working in New York as a dancer when, after the last performance, I made the mistake of getting in the wrong car. He said he paid for me, and if he didn't get what he wanted, I wasn't going home. But what he didn't know was that he underestimated me. In my late 20s, I was working as a belly dancer. I lived in New York on Long Island, but my agent was in the city. And he had assigned me to book me for a job in upstate New York. And it was a 4-night job. And it was on the 4th night that this incident took place. And I had gotten sick that day, and I got sicker through the day and sicker through the night. I did the first show. We were booked for 2 shows a night. A comedian, a belly dancer, myself, and a singer. And the comedian had been the guy that was giving me the rides from the hotel where we were staying to the club where we were performing. So anyhow, I did the first show, and I just couldn't go any longer. So I went to the club owner and told him I can't do another show. And he said, understood. But then I'm just sitting there. I'm sitting at the bar, coughing and feeling sick and feeling terrible. And because I had to wait for the comedian, so I still had to wait through the second show. And the club owner comes to me and said, "You look terrible. You're feeling terrible." He said, "One of my guys can drive you home." And stupidly, I just assumed that it was somebody who worked for him. And anyhow, he introduced me to him, and he seemed like a nice young man. He was a young man, and he not bad looking, and he seemed pleasant. And so I went with him. And the first sign that maybe I should get a little bit concerned was I noticed that we were in a completely deserted area. There were just fields around, pitch black, and in the far distance you could see a few little lights. And I didn't remember driving through that kind of area before, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure, because, if you're a passenger, who pays attention to your scenery always that much anyhow? Anyhow, he pulls over. And at that point, I think he's just a guy that wants to, get fresh with a pretty girl or something. Nothing really drastic. But I was in no mood for this. Absolutely not. And the minute he turned off the car, I said, "Look, what have you stopped for? I'm in no mood for it. Let's go." I said, "I don't feel good. I feel rotten." That's it. And he looked at me, and he reached over and he grabbed me by the throat and slammed my head against the car window and said to me, "I paid $50 for you, and if I don't get my rocks off tonight, you're not going home. You're not leaving here." Something like that. That meant a threat to my life. I don't remember the exact words now. But, and to this day, I don't understand how I reacted. Maybe because I was feeling so sick, I don't know, but it was like an instantaneous thing in my mind. And this was so unlike my normal behavior too. But it was the words, "I paid for you," that triggered me. I mean, I didn't stop to think like, who in the hell sold me, Anyhow, the minute I heard that word, I just reacted and I ran my arm up. His hand was on my throat, and I took my hand and I ran it up to him and sort of smoothed his face a little bit. And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know you paid for me." And I said, "Look, I didn't know that. Let's go to a motel. I can take much better care of you in a motel than here. I can give you a much, much better time too." And he fell for it. He didn't say anything. And I think this is when I started getting a little more for the first time I started actually feeling fear. I didn't feel fear when he jumped me up like that. It was like I just reacted. But he didn't say anything. He just started the car and we drove. And he never said a word. He didn't look at me. And I'm going thinking, what is he thinking? What's going through his mind? And that really started to bother me. But he then pulled into a motel parking lot, and I could see the motel lit up, the office. But he parked a distance from the office, and he got out of the car, still never saying anything. And I waited till he got out of the car, and then I opened the door and got out. And he stops and he looks back puzzled. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm coming with you. He said, you don't have to do that. I said, yeah, I'll come with you. And I kept about 8 to 10 feet distance from, but I'm walking towards him. He's ahead of me. And the minute I got level to him, even though we're far apart, I took off running as fast as I could. And I ran to the glass, it was all the glass doors and everything. I just ran and I grabbed the door and it was locked. It wouldn't open and I'm banging it and I look up and there's a sign that's closed. At that minute I knew I was dead. I figured he's going to come absolutely kill me. There's no other option now. And I'm thinking that he's running up to me now and going to grab me any minute and pull me anyway. So I'm banging like crazy, and I could see a man sitting there looking very puzzled, this sort of older man with gray hair, and he's looking very puzzled. Why am I banging at his door, And I'm screaming, help. And out of my corner eye, I had to look at him because I knew he was near me, any minute I was going to be grabbed by him. And he was standing where I had left him, and he was just looking puzzled. And then all of a sudden, he turned around and ran right to his car, jumped in and spun the wheels and took out of there. And thankfully, the guy at the hotel finally came and let me in, because then I would have been still deserted area. And he called to me in. I told him the situation, and he called the police. Now, I must have been more emotionally upset than I realized at the time, because I ended up, when the police were there, I had to excuse myself and go in the bathroom and throw up. And I swear to this day I threw up blood. It looked like it. I told them, and they said, no, that wasn't possible. Well, that's my memory of it. Anyhow, the policeman told me, I knew the man's, I remembered his name from the induction, the would-be rapist's name. And the policeman took me aside and he said, look, we know who he is. And he said he's the son of a very, very prominent man in this town. And this is a small town, and this man has a lot of influence. He said, they're going to give you a lot of trouble if you file a complaint. He said, I'm not telling you not to file a complaint, but think about it. And of course, I thought about it. Here I am. I'm a belly dancer against my word, against this sky and sun. I lived in another state, or lived, not in another state, it was still upstate New York, but I lived much miles away, and I had a child at home I had to take care of. And I didn't have the kind of money to fight this, to be going back and forth to this particular town to fight this man. And it really bothered me to have to give it up. And to this day, I feel sort of guilty. I wonder if there's other women that were raped or attacked by him because I didn't file a complaint. But to be honest, I don't think that I would have won any complaint that I made on him. So someone asked me now for advice if another woman's in this situation. I can't really give any advice because each situation like this is going to be different. The only thing I could possibly say is follow your instinct and do everything you can to survive. Remember, you can survive a rape, even a brutal one. You can live through it. But you can't survive being killed. So the thing to do, trust yourself, trust your instincts, and do whatever you can to survive, because if you survive, you've won. Now, another thing I want to mention on this, when I look back on this incident, I find it strangely, I finally analyzed why, but I find that I don't feel any emotional trauma from that. And I really didn't have too much trauma afterwards, after about a week of it, getting over it. And I think when I look back on it now, I look back on this incident with glee. I tricked him. And that gives me a good feeling, and it still does to this day. But I think the real reason I never had any lasting fears or anything from this incident is because the minute he pulled back and started the car, I was in control. I didn't realize it then, but he was following what I suggested. And I think one of the most traumatic things, and since I haven't been raped, I'm assuming this, I'm assuming that the feeling of being out of control and having no absolute control on what happens to your physical body has to be very, very traumatizing. I think it's a human nature not to feel in control a little bit, because it's how we keep our safety. But that's why I assume that I look back on this incident. In fact, I don't even think about it most of my life, but I look back on it with a lot of little glee, and it's like I got you, And I hope somehow life got him.